him.
Fleur.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sir Olly. I've got questions about three different aspects of the process. Going back to the very beginning, before you started, there were conversations between Peter Mandelson and Number 10. So yesterday, the Prime Minister said, "It was clear to me that Peter Mandelson's answers to my staff in the due diligence exercise, before you started, were not truthful, and I sacked him." So that sounds like it's Morgan McSweeney. But when you came into the office, did you have notes of any interview that Morgan McSweeney had held with Peter Mandelson as a part of the due diligence or even the pre-due diligence when talking about appointing him? Did you see notes of this interview that may have given you concerns that could then have influenced how you saw the vetting process continue?
No.
You didn't know about any of those?
I knew that there had been an appointment process of sorts, and that Number 10 had operated that with the Cabinet Office. But to be honest, I think I first heard the words due diligence report after he was withdrawn as ambassador.
Thank you. And then the second one is about the meeting that you held on the 29th of January about the vetting. Did you hold that meeting because it was flagged that Peter Mandelson hadn't passed? If it was a clear pass, a green tick box in the form you didn't see, would you have even held that meeting? Or did you hold the meeting because it was an ambassadorial appointment to Washington and it was Peter Mandelson?
I was asked for that meeting because I think it was a borderline case, and a particularly prominent and significant borderline case on which, perfectly properly, very sensibly, the director felt he wanted to check his reasoning and make sure that I was comfortable with it.
And is there a note to that effect? That the request was that the decision was made that you should have a meeting because of these issues were going to come up?
Not to my knowledge. It was, this was Director ESND was one of the most important figures in the way I was learning how to run the department. I'd spent a lot of time with Ian already because of the heavy responsibilities that I was learning that I held as accountable overall for security. So Ian was in and out of my private office regularly, and I was pleased about that. He, I think, said to my private office, "I need 10 minutes with Olly tomorrow, the day after, in order to take him through a particular case."
A particular case? Not the particular case that you've been rung up every day by Number 10 to ask about?
This is second hand. I'm trying to help you by guessing what the conversation might have been.
All right, okay. It's unfortunate, because if there had been a note made of the decision that the putting into the diary of a meeting that was going to take place for particular purposes and with particular reasons, if there had been a note of that, then we wouldn't need to guess at the reasons for it, and Fleur would be able to get fuller answers to the questions that she's asking.
Although I should say again, apologies, Chair, none of the issues that underlie the conversation we've been having this morning could have been committed to our IT system. So, and for all I know, my diary will say that there is an appointment with Director ESND, but the office were not allowed. It would have been a serious breach for them to try and explain in that appointment in my calendar what the underlying questions were.
You can make notes to your private office, can't you, about what you're doing and why?
What was done, I think, entirely appropriately, was that the decision was recorded the next day.
Thank you. I think what we're getting to here is that when the Prime Minister was told the process was just carried out and it was passed, actually there were different layers to this process than normally happened because of the borderline case that you described. So the meeting was held because of the borderline case. You've already said to us in your evidence to us in November that one of the hardest parts of this was the Global Council shares, and that must have been part of the mitigations, therefore. So did you hold follow-up meetings about the Global Council shares, how that was going, at which the borderline case could then still have gone either way if the mitigations weren't carried out, that you were satisfied could have been carried out?
I had many discussions with Mandelson about his Global Council stake and how we manage it, not just the shares, but also the relationships that he would have built up as chairman of Global Council, founder. We had a mitigation strategy in place for dealing with those. The main prism through which I saw those, Ms. Anderson, was managing conflicts of interest, which is not, strictly speaking, a national security issue. I suppose in extremis it could turn into one, but was more about protecting, of course, I suppose, Mandelson's reputation, but potentially protecting the government and the Foreign Office's reputation against any perception that he was advantaging Global Council or its clients. And that was the dialogue I had with him, starting, I think, a couple of days after his DV clearance was given. Conflict of interest management, as I may have said to the committee when we talked about this back in November, is an iterative process. You know, it would be a serious mistake to say all conflicts are managed, tick, let's forget about it. You have to actively manage them, so we kept coming back to it. And also, in order to give me greater confidence, with his permission, I briefed his office and his senior team in Washington to help me keep an eye on any perceptions of conflict as his term as ambassador advanced.
Thank you. And when other ambassadors are appointed, it is normal that they've been through the process. This is a separate issue. I understand that they would have been through developed vetting as a normal part of their appointment before that. But in those cases, is it usual to have a series of mitigations and then be working through the mitigations? Is it normal in other circumstances, or is this very unusual?
I hope this is not in itself a breach, but I was revising for myself the department's own internal guidance on this, which is available to anyone going through the vetting process. What it says is, where we do find a risk, we always try to manage it through our aftercare programme or risk mitigation. So that is standard process for all applicants and holders of DV. So the process I'm describing to you was not some special one we invented for Mandelson. It's a completely standard part of the consideration of granting DV.
Okay, thank you. So then my final question's about the most recent part of the process. So the moments that the Prime Minister talked about, those moments when he felt he should have been told more, that when he went to the House of Commons and to Prime Minister's questions and others, those moments when the unusual parts of the process, not the internal parts of the security vetting that should be rightly kept secret, but the outcome of that and the fact that it was not a straightforward process. So first, when you had the vetting process advice in January 2025. Second, when Mandelson was sacked in September and the Prime Minister gave a statement to Parliament, and that there were press comments that Mandelson had failed his vetting. It was beginning to be the heavy pressure on what happened actually in the process. Then third and fourth, when you appeared before us in November and that you wrote to the chair of this committee. Fifth, there was PMQs and the humble address debate on the 4th of February. And then sixth, the response to the humble address debate on the 16th of March. Every single time it was either the Foreign Secretary or the Prime Minister or another minister making a statement who had to stand up in front of the House of Commons and other places to justify the process going on. Was it your same decision every single time that the due process had been followed and that's the only thing that should be disclosed? Or did you receive advice during that time from security specialists, from propriety specialists? We've already talked about legal advice, that the decision to withhold the information about the vetting outcome should remain the same, or did it change through that time? Did you receive further advice?
It's a great question. Do you mind a slightly long answer? Because there's a lot here. So, I'm afraid, not least because my memory is not good enough, going to go through all of those 6 instances. But the fundamental here is that as we prepared the joint letter that the Foreign Secretary and I sent to the chair back on the 16th of September, and in parallel, Stephen Doughty's briefing for his appearance in the House of Commons the same day, to take one example, we prepared all of that, not just in consultation with the Cabinet Office and Number 10, but as I recall it, with Number 10 telling us that we needed to make definitively clear that ministers and Number 10 were not involved in the vetting process in any way. Now, that's not designed to be outrageous to me. That was exactly what I expected. That was exactly the basis on which I have been operating the process since I was appointed Permanent Under-Secretary, and is consistent, I hope, with my evidence both in November and to you today. So as we then worked to satisfy the need of Parliament, of this committee, for as much as we could safely give, we always had that in the back of our minds, and we had it, I thought, with the confidence of knowing that that was understood to be the position between us, ministers, and Number 10. And so it shouldn't, I hope, then come as a surprise to think that at each of these junctures, I'm not, one scapegoat for this is enough. But I have seen, I remember there being not a single dissenting voice amongst my senior team, my security team, my personnel team, that we were taking exactly the right approach. And I certainly don't remember being challenged about it by ministers.
There was no indication that you should seek legal advice, as has subsequently been done and able to give to the Prime Minister, that it wasn't the whole truth that that Peter Mandelson had just passed the vetting process. The whole truth was that there were concerns along the way. You couldn't reveal any of those concerns, but there were concerns. They were looked into, and then he passed his vetting. There was no consideration that could have been a more full, complete version of events.
There was nothing unique about that situation, Ms. Anderson, if I may say so. As I've tried to explain, the way DV is a risk judgment, and DV depends then quite often on the management and mitigation of those risks. And that's the internal guidance I read out to you earlier is absolutely clear about that. The objective of the system is not to discover things about people and trip them up. It's to encourage the applicant to be open and make full and frank disclosure of potential vulnerabilities, and then, if possible, find ways of managing them. And if we turn DV into a pass-fail piety test, what we end up doing is robbing the British state of a lot of very, very capable people with complicated lives and potential vulnerabilities. And I really, really don't want that for the sake of this country. If anything, this government needs to be served by an ever-increasing range of people with broad experience and interesting lives, not suddenly find that the only people we can employ in sensitive roles are ones who raise no issues whatsoever.
It's interesting and interesting.